Today I'm going to be giving y'all my review of The Flash, while also talking about some of the controversy surrounding Ezra Miller. I just wish there was a way I could talk about both without getting in too much trouble. What's that?
Read it.
Why?
Just read it.
Alright. As I begin my review of The Flash, I must first address the controversial behavior of the leading actor, Ezra Miller. While the actor has been under fire for many illegal and morally corrupt actions, I will still attempt to bypass the multiple cases of assault, child grooming, reckless behavior, harassment, and burglary in order to provide the closest resemblance to a non-biased review of the Flash movie. Just as a quick heads up, I am not going to be covering major spoilers until closer to the midpoint of the video. So don't worry, I'll be sure to let you guys know ahead of time. But with that being said, let's get right into it. This movie has been locked in development purgatory for so many years. It seems like they took forever trying to find writers. They shuffled around directors too many times to count. And not to mention that the release date got pushed back once, and then twice, and then 3 times. Another time after that. Before you know it, The Flash had been delayed almost 5 years.
Wow.
But going back to the very beginning of the marketing for this movie, personally, I was so very excited to be able to see The Flash have his own standalone movie.
Yes!
Ever since I was a little boy, I loved everything that had to do with Speedsters. Whether it was Quicksilver, Sonic the Hedgehog, The Flash. I loved the concept of a fast-talking and fast-moving superhero. But enough of all of that. I know why y'all are actually here. Did The Flash actually live up to the hype? It's complicated. The movie itself was definitely tasked to cover several important topics. You had to close out the Snyderverse and all of its characters. You had to tell the origin story of Barry Allen that we hadn't seen yet. You had to adapt the Flashpoint story and explore the multiverse. You had to set up the freshly rebooted DCU under James Gunn. You had to include returning legacy characters such as Michael Keaton's Batman and Michael Shannon's Zod, and so much more. So normally when a movie tries to balance all of these different things, that usually adds up to an automatic failure, right? But yet somehow, some way, they managed to pull it off. So here's what I liked about the film. One of the most important things that stuck out to me was the strong thematic messages of healthy acceptance and overcoming grief from trauma. This trauma and grief gets explored perfectly through Barry's relationship with his parents. It's really a focal point for driving his motivations throughout the movie. And plus, I'm just a sucker for a movie about family.
I don't have friends. I got family.
No.
Family.
No.
Family.
Not again. What specifically worked for me was the relationship between Barry and his mother, Nora Allen. Once you buy into that incredible mother and son relationship, it starts to explain a lot more of why Barry made the decisions that he did later on in the movie to rip apart the multiverse. And also the movie's definitely not afraid with dealing with the consequences of his actions. What really reminds me of this subject is actually Across the Spider-Verse, which came out not a couple weeks ago. But in Across the Spider-Verse, you deal a lot with Miles Morales coming face to face with the expectations of who he should be and being able to look all that in the face and go, nah, I'm gonna do my own thing. Whereas in The Flash, it's kind of the opposite of that, where Barry Allen has to come face to face with his trauma and grief, and instead of using his abilities to change the past and give himself the perfect life, he instead has to choose to let that go, and in a way sacrificing his happiness for the safety of the entire universe. Again, both of them have somewhat related concepts, and I see them as two sides of the same coin. Another big positive that I had about The Flash was the incredible cast of supporting characters. I'm not lying to you guys when I say I had a lot of hesitation when I first found out that they were bringing back Michael Keaton as the 1989 Batman. And I think my fears were pretty understandable, especially considering some of the crap that's come out in other multiversal movies not named Into the Spider-Verse or Across the Spider-Verse. Cause yeah, the writers of The Flash could 100% have had Michael Keaton show up as nothing more than a glorified cameo. He wears the iconic bat suit, says 1 or 2 iconic quotes, and then dips.
You wanna get nuts? Let's get nuts.
But actually, I was pleasantly surprised at the depth he added to this story. It kind of has some resemblance to Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's roles in Spider-Man No Way Home. In the same way that those two Spider-Men showed up to provide a veteran presence for Peter and assist to drive the plot towards the finale, Michael Keaton has the exact same role in The Flash. Yeah, you do have to suspend some belief that a 70-year-old can still flip around like he's 30 years old all over again when he probably already has an AARP membership.
My back! Oh, my back!
But hey, seeing an older Batman doing all kinds of acrobatic flips and taking on a room of bad guys without even breaking a sweat, that's a pretty easy way to get me to look the other way when it comes to realism. Cause it's Batman. Enough said. I also do like that we spend just enough time in Wayne Manor and the '89 Batcave to get our nostalgia hit, but it's not overdone or gratuitous, because it actually serves a purpose. Too many modern movies like to bring older characters back that we know and love, just to have them whine and complain about being left alone. I'm looking at you, Luke.
Go away.
So yeah, it's definitely refreshing to see Batman decide to help fairly quickly without having to spend half the movie being convinced to help out. And you want to know what was also a pretty pleasant surprise? Sasha Calle is Supergirl. We really didn't get to spend much screen time with her, but the scenes that we got actually had me sold. I think she did an excellent job portraying Supergirl as a mature, powerful, and likable hero. While her motivations do switch pretty quickly from humans are pathetic and I don't want to help to I just saw Zod kill a bunch of military guys and now I want to help, tell me what I need to do. Felt a little quick for her to switch up like that, but it wasn't so far-fetched that it took me out of it. And overall, I would not be upset if we got her in any future projects. I also was really glad that we got to see Ben Affleck return as Batman. And I've already made my thoughts very clear about how I believe Ben Affleck is the best portrayal of Batman in live action, and I will continue to die on that hill.
That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
But I still believe he never fully had an actual fair shake at the character. So even though this is probably the last time we got to see him, having him shoot around the city using all of his gadgets, wearing a suit that, while not my favorite, it's still pretty cool, and his banter back and forth with Barry was all very believable for his character, and it just warmed my heart to see him back again. I think Ben Affleck really enjoyed his time as Batman, and it really is a shame to see him go. Wonder Woman, on the other hand, I really can't say much about. Oh, is that a spoiler? Oh, oops, sorry.
Why are you the way that you are?
Yeah, well, I'm already in trouble, so I'm gonna say it anyway. Wonder Woman is briefly in this movie, but to be honest, she doesn't stay for long. She's in there for like 5 seconds as she stands proudly and just smirks and goes,
"Do I always have to clean up after you boys?"
yeah, I wasn't really a fan of that. And speaking of supporting characters that I wasn't a huge fan of, I gotta talk about Iris West real quick. We've seen her in 3 movies already, but yet she's still barely interacted with Barry. What's worse is when you look at the comics, she is to Flash what MJ is to Peter Parker. And all we get in this movie is just a couple of stilted conversations with her and Barry, where you don't really see much chemistry between the 2 actors. Needless to say, their relationship portrayal did not make me feel convinced that they would be a power couple in the future. Another unfortunate, huge bummer was Michael Shannon as Zod. He absolutely was one of the standouts from Man of Steel, but he gets absolutely nothing to do here. Every line of dialogue just felt like he was reading off of a script, and he seemed almost bored to be there. All I can really say is that he was very forgettable, and I hate to say that.
We were on the verge of greatness. We were this close.
Now, I just spent a pretty decent amount of time praising the movie, and you're probably saying, so Jonah, this means you liked the movie 100%, right? Well, I actually did have several sincere issues that really decreased my enjoyment of the film. And let's get right into it. Starting with the CGI. Now, just a heads up, I will be talking about some spoilers from here on out, so you have been warned. If you've been on the internet at all in the last few weeks, there are fans and critics alike just absolutely dunking on the film for its terrible CGI. And I believe that it's 100% justified. How can a movie that's been in development for over a decade and has been finished for an entire year still have graphics and CGI that looks like it's been stuck in the early 2000s?
You can't keep getting away with it!
So for example, there's a scene in the movie that involves a bunch of babies that Barry has to save. And I know that they probably couldn't use real babies, but there are several other ways to show off the Flash's powers, and I don't think this was the right way. Every single baby that was in this scene, I think there was like 10 of them, all looked so shiny and superimposed, and just had no sense of realism whatsoever. And especially considering that this is at the beginning of the movie, that's not a great way to immediately grab your audience's attention when you're too busy laughing at how stupid it looks. I'm not gonna break down every single instance of bad CGI in this movie. All I'm gonna say is that since the budget of this movie was close to, if not exceeding, $300 million, you mean to tell me that the executives couldn't have slid the animators just a few more dollars in pocket change to get this stuff refined? I'm dead serious when I say that if they actually decided to polish up most of the CGI in this film and make it look actually completed, that would take away one of my biggest problems with the movie. All right, now I gotta do this. Let's talk about the cameos. As we're hurtling towards the finale of the film, we see the entire multiverse start to fracture because of the actions of young Barry. And we see all kinds of different worlds starting to slowly hurtle into each other, which leads to us catching glimpses of other variations of well-known DC superheroes. But this specifically, I believe, was a massive mistake. Sure, the concept sounds cool with seeing characters that we haven't seen on screen in probably over several decades, but the way that they brought them back was cheap and terrible in my opinion. The idea of bringing back all of these actors, whether they were alive or dead, and bringing them to this film with absolute god-awful CGI, you can't even compare PlayStation 2 graphics compared to this, because that's a disrespect to PlayStation 2 graphics. So just spitballing on top of my head when it comes to the cameos, we had Christopher Reeve and Helen Slater as Superman and Supergirl. We got Adam West's Batman. I think we also had George Reeves and Nick Cage. Yes, the Nick Cage.
Not the beast! Not the beast!
Whoever's idea it was to recreate these actors and their characters' faces with CGI that looked like it was straight out of a trash can should be absolutely ashamed of themselves.
Dishonor on your whole family.
Not only is it specifically disrespectful to the deceased actors just to be resurrected for a cameo that exists only for internet clicks, but also the way that they look doesn't inspire cheers or excitement, probably due to the fact that the characters all look like they were designed in a Nintendo DS. It makes it even worse when the director doubles down on the decisions and tries to say that they meant for the CGI to look bad, and I'm a huge fan of director Andy Muschietti, but I thought that was a terrible decision by him.
You're so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
Because not only does it sound like a pathetic excuse to try to convince people that you knew what you were doing, but it really discredits and invalidates a lot of us as the fans' opinions. Because you cannot convince me that they took a look at all of the bad CGI in this film and they said, oh yeah, no, we're totally meaning to do that. Also, I gotta say, if we're gonna be doing all of these cameos, where's my boy Grant Gustin? Whether you love or hated the CW's version of The Flash, Grant gave almost a decade of his life to portraying the Scarlet Speedster, and he doesn't get so much as a mention, not even one. Not cool, man. I know all of this sounds like nitpicking, but the way I see it is that this film had years to get it right, so I don't want to give studios a free pass anymore, and that's why my expectations are so high. Now the topic that I've been avoiding for pretty much this entire review. Let's talk about Ezra Miller. I'm gonna start by doing my best of separating the performance from all the personal issues. And with that being said, I can't help but admit it. Ezra Miller was phenomenal in this movie. In his first appearance in Justice League, I found the Flash to be pretty annoying.
That feels like an oversimplification.
And he wasn't really quite my idea of what I imagined a live-action Barry Allen to be. But in The Flash, Ezra Miller actually delivers a very nuanced and layered performance. I know there's a lot of people complaining about his annoying younger self in the movie, and while I definitely agree that he is absolutely insane, I actually think that it was a pretty smart idea, because it makes OG Barry Allen look way more mature and established. I really didn't hate that. But where Miller truly shines is whenever the actor needs to convey emotion. Barry Allen is weighed down and burdened by the death of his mom and the wrongful imprisonment of his father, and Miller is so convincing in this tortured role, but yet still doesn't lose the charisma that we know this version of Barry Allen to have. And the scene at the end where he says goodbye to his mom is the best scene in the movie, and you cannot convince me otherwise. The tender affection shown by his mom without her even knowing that she's talking to her grown-up son, that's gonna stick with me for a while. So yeah, Ezra Miller's performance was very, very good. But there is a Godzilla-sized elephant in this room right now. You know it, I know it, and it's the history of Ezra Miller's horrible accusations and criminal wrongdoings. For time's sake, I'm not even gonna go through all of them. Here, you read. With all of those terrible decisions made by Miller, how, and I cannot stress this enough, how is this actor still employed? We've seen countless examples of Hollywood blacklisting celebrities for a whole lot less than this. And yet DC continued to still double down on keeping Ezra Miller as their headlining star. It's even gotten to the point where Ezra Miller wasn't even allowed to do press for The Flash, and barely even spoke at the red carpet premiere. It makes you wonder why DC tried so hard to initiate damage control, and yet still can't have their leading actor promote their blockbuster film. To me, this entire fiasco was a pretty terrible look for DC Studios as a whole. And when you have the director insisting that no other actor could have portrayed Barry Allen as well as Ezra Miller, that really lowers their credibility in my eyes. Now, I do believe that anyone has the potential to change, and I hope that Ezra Miller gets genuine professional help. But I'm still frustrated at the clear lack of accountability from DC, who apparently were still sneaking Ezra Miller into the studio for Flash reshoots last year while the actor was on the run from police. Just mind-blowing stuff. It's stupid. So in my eyes, no matter how much DC tries to cover up all of the things that Ezra Miller did, those same actions do impact my enjoyment of this movie to a certain degree. This really is unfortunate, but at the end of the day, understanding Hollywood is an impossible task. But if I'm talking about The Flash as a whole, while it is certainly no Across the Spider-Verse with a complex message and mind-blowing visuals, I actually would consider The Flash to be an enjoyable popcorn flick that really almost everyone can be entertained by in their own way. And you know what? Compared to Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which also released this year, The Flash looks like a masterpiece. But what did you think? Have you seen or are you planning to see The Flash? What's your perspective on the Ezra Miller situation? Drop all your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below and let's talk about it. But with all that out of the way, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.